Torah Life Ministries come out of the world. Messiah people seek the truth.
Hello everybody, it's Paul Neeson with Torah Life Ministries, and can you believe it? We're up to the end of Genesis. We're teaching here, the Torah teaches each week, and we're up to this week's 12th reading. We're at the end of Genesis. We're going to be starting the book of Exodus, but this week's reading is from Genesis 47:28 to 50:26. And we continue with the story of Jacob coming to meet Joseph, and they all moved to Egypt. All of Joseph's brothers, including his father Jacob, they moved to Egypt, and they're thriving in the land, and they're just having a wonderful time. But we come to this week's reading, where we see, it starts off and says that, Jacob lived in the land of Egypt for 17 years, and he was 147 years old. Now in Noah's time, when it says man's days should be 120 years old, he wasn't limiting man's age and said man is going to live to 120 years. It's unlimited, the time and the capability we have to live. And this is great proof, because there's 147 years, and many other people that lived a lot longer than 120 years after our Creator told Noah that man's day should be 120 years. What that was referring to, I believe, was, man had 120 years to get right with our Creator's word before destruction came. And it wasn't exactly to the day 120 years when a flood came after that, but it was pretty close. Well, we still have time to get right with his word. And it might not be 120 years. It might be a lot quicker, a lot sooner, as many people are predicting. But the time is coming, so we need to start getting right with his word. And, I usually say, why wait? Because people set a date and they say, well, I'm going to wait and I'll get right with his word, at a certain date. But I'm saying, no, do it now. Don't wait another second. Start reading his word and get right. But we see here Joseph. Joseph was here. He was the leader of Egypt now for 26 years. And he was 56 years old at this time, starting in this week's Torah portion. And we see Jacob, he knew he was sick. He was coming to the end of his life. He just knew it. Something about these Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and a lot of the other prophets here in Scripture, they seem to have known, okay, my time is done, my time is up. So they were able to pass along the advice and the blessings and the information to their children. There's a lot of unexpected accidents that happen in life in general, but there's so much more today, I believe, due to our unrighteousness, where our lives are taken so sudden oftenly, and we don't know and we can't pass along these blessings in time. But there are very righteous people too, where their lives were taken suddenly as well. This year we lost a very righteous brother, David Wilkinson, who used to run Times Square Church in New York City. And I had went there and I'd seen him a couple of times. And a wonderful righteous man, and his life was taken suddenly and quickly. And, so he was a very righteous man. But he lived a life where he taught and blessed his family and his friends and his congregants. He blessed them and told them, what to do and how to follow the word. And there are things that are going to happen in our life, and we don't know when our end of our life is going to come. And yes, what a blessing it would be for us to be able to pass down the guidelines and instructions of our Creator to our children and our children's children, to see our children's children, because it says here in this scripture, and we'll get to it, where it says in this week's, it says, when Joseph said, I never even thought I would see, or Jacob said to Joseph, I never even thought I'd see you again, but I even get to see your children. What a blessing that is. But just because we don't know when the end is coming, we need to live our life every single day, giving an example and glorifying our Creator and showing how that is to be done. So we look at this week, we see Jacob telling Joseph, he says, when I was in the land of Luz, in the land of Canaan, I had this dream, and a wonderful Creator told me, he said, I will give this land to you and your descendants to possess forever. And that is the land of Israel. And that came true, and we are going to possess that land forever. Not because Jacob wanted that, not because Abraham said that, it's because our wonderful Creator promised that, and he's not breaking his promise. But then we go here and we see where he's talking to Joseph, and it was actually the exact scripture was Genesis 48:9, it says, where Jacob said, "Bring your children to me, Joseph, so I could bless them." And his eyes were very dim, and so he could not see. Well, that was just like his father Isaac. His eyes were dim. And when he gave the blessing to Jacob by accident, because he couldn't see who the true child really was that should be blessed. And it's very interesting. What goes around comes around. And now we see Jacob's eyes very dim, but Joseph brings his two sons in front of him. And this is where Jacob tells Joseph, "I never even thought I'd see you again, and I get to see your two sons again as well." And we hear in the news these stories about, these crazy stories about somebody thinks somebody's passed away, or they get amnesia and they go away, and then they find their family many years later, or somebody finds their adoptive parents many years later. Well, can you imagine what Jacob went to? His favorite son, and he thought he was destroyed and killed, and he had to live pretty much a good part of his life in distress about this, and he did live his life in distress about this, and then he finds that he's alive, and he gets to spend time with him, and he gets to bless his children. Boy, this is exciting. So he blesses his children, but he says in the blessing, he reminds all his own children and the children of his children, he said, may they remember who I am and what I stand for. And then he goes and he said, remember my father Abraham and Isaac, who they were and what they stood for. And that's the whole issue, and that's the whole subject that I want to talk about this week, is remembering who Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were and what they stood for. Remembering them, what they did and how they did it, and more important, what they stood for. We have a creator who speaks to us on a regular basis, and our obedience to him is the most important way to live, to be blessed, to live stress-free, and I'm not going to say trouble-free, but within that trouble, we know his hand is in it, so we'll have much less stress. And to follow his words and guidelines. They lived for that. And that, as believers of Messiah, we have to live for. So we could tell our children, not only remember who we were, but remember what we stood for. We stood for the righteousness, to glorify a wonderful Creator, and his words, not our own feelings and our own ideas and our own emotions. But we put all that aside and we said, let's see what he says, what he wants us to do, and how he wants us to do it. He has his plan for us, and if we want to be blessed, we stick to his plan. He's given us many, many, many instructions and guidelines on how to live his life. But he says those guidelines and instructions will not be burdensome for those who love me. If you love him, you're going to want to follow him. But it's our own human nature, where even our own kids love us, but they don't necessarily agree with us or follow us. But what do we do as children when we grow up, when we get older? We start to realize that there was some wisdom to my father's instructions. When I was a little kid, I might have disagreed. When I was a teenager, I might have rebelled. But now that I'm older and I have my own children and I have more wisdom, now I start to understand and see that some of the things that he said might not have been as crazy. Some of the warnings he gave me, were cautiousness, but they were also wisdom. So we can't see some things, as a little child, but as we grow, we see a lot more. And, he wants us to see his compassion and his love for us so we can be blessed. And that's the greatest way to glorify him. There's new things that are happening. There's new beginnings. There's a new life. And even if you think you're born again and you're following the ways that he told us to follow, well, now it's time to be born again and born again. Now it's time to, like a beautiful flower, the wind could just blow it away. But he gives us life, and he lets us keep growing, and we flourish from a little tiny seed into a big tree. It's about growth, and we keep growing. Many of you out there, you understand who he is, but you don't necessarily understand what he wants you to do. A lot of times a Christian will say to me, well, I don't read the Torah because I'm not Jewish. That just understands your misunderstanding of what Scripture says. The Torah is the first 5 books of the Bible. How could you call yourself a believer and accept Messiah and want to study and love him and live and learn his words and not read the Bible? Oxymoron. So we want to start getting right with his word. In Genesis 50, we see the end of the book of Genesis, but we also see the end of the life of Joseph. And we see he says to his brothers here in Genesis 50:24, I am dying, but our wonderful Creator will surely remember you. He will remember you and bring you up out of this land to the land that he swore he would give Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So we need to remember that. First of all, we're all going to die. Our human life is all going to come to an end. But, we're to teach our children his guidelines and instructions. And that's how we bless them truly. We could say a blessing over them, but the true blessing is to teach them the guidelines and instructions and pray that they will be obedient to them. But to also know that we have a promised land that he's going to give us. And there's a promised land waiting for all of us. We need to remember that. We need to teach our children. We need to teach our fellow brothers and sisters and glorify our Creator by being obedient to his word. We come to the end of the book of Genesis, and we move on to the book of Exodus. And we continue to see the story that created the foundation of how to be blessed and how to live a holy life in peace and shalom. I pray that the book of Genesis has blessed all of you out there. And if you haven't read it, I pray you do read it, because it's the foundation of all of the scriptures. And then we move on to Shemot, the book of Exodus, and the next week's reading, the parasha 13. And the first 5 books of the scriptures are so vitally important, the Torah, to learn the guidelines and instructions, but they don't stop there. They continue all the way to Revelations. And what a blessing it is. So thanks for joining us here on Torah Life Ministries. We're posting videos every day. You could just go to healthwatchman.com and click under the videos, and then click on the Bible videos, and you can see them all. Until then, everybody, have a great Shabbat this coming week. And thanks for checking us out, and shalom, shalom.
Torah Life Ministries come out of the world. Messiah people seek the truth.